Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Jeff Mendelson, and this is the One Big Tip podcast. My guest today is Jamin Warren. Jamin is the CEO and founder of Twofivesix, a strategic consultancy that helps brands engage in the world of gaming. His work helps companies reach the right gaming audience on the right platform with the right message. Gamers are consumers and potential customers, and Jamin has made it his mission to give brands the research, strategy, and execution they need to reach gamers with an authentic and natural voice. This is going to be a really great conversation today because I I used to think of myself as a gamer until I clocked in how much I actually game, and it's really not that much. So I'm not sure if I'm actually in that population or not. But at the end of the day, it's like I taught my kids how to do it. They're all about Roblox and Minecraft, so they're probably a little bit more into it than I am. And I'm just really excited to have this conversation today. So, Jamin, thank you so much for joining me and welcome
Of
to the
course.
show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I would like to learn a little bit more about your background, right? How you got into this, why gaming in particular, and what is it that makes you so amazing at it?
Yeah. Well, my background, after college, I was a reporter at the Wall Street Journal. I covered arts and entertainment for them for about 5 years. And the timing of that was really interesting because this was like 2006, 2007, 2008. So there were a bunch of new game consoles that were coming out. So you had things like the, Nintendo Wii, you had the PlayStation 3, the Xbox 360, on top of things like the Kindle store was available, the App Store. You started having digital distribution platforms that were launching or were maturing. And so what was interesting was that you were starting to see this really big expansion of the number and types of people who were getting access to games. Gaming at that point was already a really big industry. And so I thought, hey, I'm a culture reporter. I'll just write about games the same way I write about everything else. Went to my editor and was like, hey, I want to write about video games. And he was like, I don't get this video game thing, which I get now. I'm more sympathetic to, that point of view now, but like any disgruntled 20 something, I was like, I'll start my own magazine, which I did. And it was called Kill Scream. We focused on independent games. And around that time, we started getting more calls from like brands and agencies that were interested in the game space, but they weren't really sure how to plug in. And myself, I had never worked in an agency before, so I didn't really have an agency background. I wasn't really sure about like what kind of services I could offer them. And so we started 256 basically to help service brands and agencies that were interested in getting into the space. So we do research, strategy, and consultative execution. So we're really interested in helping folks kind of take that next step. So when you're having that conversation with someone and they say, I don't get this games thing, just like my editor all those years ago, that's the place where we can be helpful for brands, helping them step in.
So help us out. How big is this market in
Yeah.
order to keep you employed? I mean, there's got to be there is some serious money behind it,
Yeah.
right?
No, of
There
course.
is some the serious marketing dollars. And what happens is that you have a lot of serious, passionate people, both who are producing it and those that consume it. Tell us a little bit about, what those demographics look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So the estimates are there's between 2 and 3 billion gamers on the planet. So we're moving out of a world where people ask, "Do you play games?" and into one where people ask like, "Hey, what games do you play?" And that's really exciting. There is a really big generational divide. So if you look at folks, basically Gen Z, millennials, I'm a cusper. I'm kind of in between two different generations. The number of folks who are playing games, if you're under 18, it's like 99%. For millennials, it's like 70, 80%. And then it goes down as you start to get older, but then it actually goes back up again when people start to retire. So one of the biggest growth areas has actually been gamers in their 60s and 70s. The AARP actually put out their own research on the increase of, gamers over the age of 70, which is really cool. From an industry dollar standpoint, there's over $100 billion that are spent on gaming annually worldwide. And one of the bigger things here is that the number of companies that generate more than $1 billion in a year went from just a handful about 10 years ago to this year there's about 30 companies. So it's not just that the number of players, the number of slices in the pie is increasing, the overall size of the pie continues to go up. So in the macro, I think we're seeing it in lots of different ways, whether it's dollar signs, but you're also seeing crossover things. So obviously the popularity of like the Last of Us television show is a big marker of that. Super Mario Brothers movie just opened this weekend, did pretty well. So I think games that have always been a very large commercial industry, but the cultural cultural proficiency, people's cultural understanding of it, that's taken time and that's been on a lag. So that's starting to basically those two areas are really starting to intersect now.
So let's talk a little bit about, why this is important, right? I was telling you a little bit in the pre-call that, I'm good for one game every 2 years, Call of
Yeah,
Duty, right? That's it. I don't buy any of the other ones. I'm just, I just don't have a lot of time for it. But B, it's, like for me, it's therapy, right? And the thing
yeah,
is that now these games, they're $100 to get, right? Plus, they are hitting you up for all kinds of in-app purchases, right?
sure,
So
yeah,
I can see going down the rabbit hole of spending at least a couple $100 more per month just to level up and to, and to be great at these games. So the money is definitely there. The market has already been proven. And every once in a while, I see, like these crossovers, like you said, with the Super Mario Brothers, or when King Kong and Godzilla came out, there was
sure.
there was like 2 weeks of crossover where King Kong is also trying to level this island, and you're trying to beat him up, with your little weapons, things like that. But how do you then get to talk to, regular mainstream brands,
Sure.
like I don't know, like Gatorade, Starbucks, Nike, things like that, and to get them actually in the game, if you will, and get them to start thinking, how can we reach this particular audience? What does
Yeah.
that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have found that one of the indicators of success to marketing to gamers, you need three things. You need to have a marketing fit, which means that you need to have a deep understanding of like what your passions and your abilities are as a marketing team. You need to have an audience fit. That's another big one I see where sometimes brands have a perception of who they think their audience is in the world of gaming, but that doesn't actually match who their customers are. And then the last one's actually really important, which is organizational fit. So that one I really underestimated when I was getting started, which is that you need to have consistency across a marketing organization, that gaming is the place where you're trying to go or participate in. Maybe it's not the whole of your marketing, but it does need to be consistent. So I see it happen one of two ways, where you either have a younger cohort of employees that want to do stuff in gaming, but there isn't buy-in from senior leadership, or it's the other way around, where you have senior executives, the CMO, C-suite, their kids are playing games. They're like, what's our strategy with gaming? And it feels like a top-down sort of thing. So I find that like the most successful client relationships that we've had, there's two big things. I'd say one is that the person that we're sitting across the table from has some kind of connection to gaming. It's not opportunistic. Ideally, it's personal. So it's not just through, say, their kids or through family members. It's something that they do. They don't need to play games all the time, obviously, but it should be something that they have a personal connection to. And then the second big thing is making sure that the organization is actually committed to it. So those are, when you're looking at big organizations like that, that's really important that they understand, because I think the good news is that we've moved past the stage. When I was starting my career, I often was in an evangelistic mode, where I was often having to convince someone that gaming was a big deal. And so coming out of the pandemic, I think that ship has sailed. I don't think that that's something that I need to argue about, but figuring out like, how do I, as a brand or as a brand manager, how do I leverage the resources of our organization to do something that's interesting and unique? That's a bit tougher. So I'd say making sure that, if you're for big brands like that, there does need to be some consistency. If it's just driven by FOMO, it won't stick, and it won't lead to like long term or like lasting change.
So let's talk a little bit about what happens when it works, right? So like you said, they fit all that criteria before they come into you. You're able to put that square peg into a square hole and to match them up with the game that it does actually make sense. What is the net result then of when that synergy happens? Both for you, but also for the client and the gamers themselves.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good question. I think measuring return, like ROI or ROAS or whatever that might be for you, depending on what your metrics are, I think sometimes can be really challenging when you look at gaming. So a lot of the activity that you see out in market really focuses on really brand building exercises. So you look at like in-game activations, so things like Fortnite or Minecraft, or you do something where you do a partnership with gaming. One of the places where we've been really interested is looking at, basically like mid-funnel. So after you've already determined that you're doing something in the world of gaming, what are ways in which you can be creating or strategically creating content to generate a return? So we do a lot of work with Intel, for example. The work that we do with them spans a couple different areas, whether that's consulting with them on like social campaign work or helping them develop editorial content to educate people on how to build their first PC. That's been a really interesting area for us. Is like if you've already established a reason to play, so to speak, in the space, figuring out how to pay that off for people is really, really important. So that's one where I feel like often if you're looking for something very practical or actionable, I think a lot of times when we're talking about marketing to gamers, we often only focus on these really big, expensive, buzzy activations and not the, more, workman like day-to-day activities. So whether that's doing stuff on social or monitoring a community on Discord or doing something on Instagram, or even things like in-game advertising is another place where you don't see as many brands play in that space. You often see gaming companies spend time with in-game advertising, but there's a whole universe of much more turnkey stuff. So I think there's a lot of like quote unquote boring stuff that you can do to market to gamers that's really interesting and exciting. You just need to sort of make sure you don't gravitate too much to like what's going to be the big expensive thing that happens like once or twice a year in the gaming space.
So what happens when you have a company that wants to participate in game? So now I'm thinking metaverse or
Yeah, yeah.
in-universe type of type of actions where they're actually playing alongside or playing against you, for example.
Sure.
Intel against this squad of Call of Duty soldiers, things like that.
Sure.
How does that work? How do companies then sort of ascertain like how to get to and then spend that digital currency in order to
Yeah.
build up brand recognition there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the interesting things about the world of gaming is that, say, unlike say like film and TV or the music industry, they have set patterns and ways of working. So if you're a brand and you want to do something with a musician, for example, there are often templates. There's certain ways that you can engage. It's everything from doing like an experiential, a pop-up at a, say Coachella or something like that, or you feature, the musician or, the actor in a co-branded partnership or something like that. With gaming, it's much, much wider because then oftentimes it's unique to the specific title that you're interested in. So there's a couple things that you need to do before you get started. First and foremost is make sure that your audience actually plays the game. This sounds really, really simple, but you'd be surprised how often I had a woman come to me. She was running a fashion label and she was really interested in doing something in Fortnite. And I was asking her about her audience, and she's like, they're in their 30s and 40s. It's mostly like working professional women. I'm like, that's great. That audience plays games. They're probably not playing a ton of Fortnite. I'm not saying that's not a place where your audience isn't, but let's look at some other spaces. Mobile tends to be a really popular place to play there. There are other titles that you could look at. So that's the first thing. The second big thing is make sure that you understand what you're bringing to the table. You have to remember that game companies, when they're doing things, the bulk of their revenue is not coming from advertising. So they're not looking at, they don't think of themselves as media properties the way that like film, TV, television, OTT, the way they think about that. So their chief priority is making sure that players are, as end users, have the best experience possible. So you need to be thinking about, what can I do if I'm bringing something to the table? It's not just about getting your product in front of a set of gamers. You need to be asking, like, what am I going to do that's going to improve their quality of life? And so when you look at the successful partnerships on things like Fortnite, for example, that's why you see a lot of IP branded entertainment stuff, is because that's stuff that adds value. So if you get to play as, your favorite anime character in a Fortnite game, like that's great for the IP holder. That's also great for players as well. So I think those are two big things that you need to really make sure that you've got nailed down before you jump into the game space.
I think the thing that brought me into Fortnite to play with my kids is when I got to be the Mandalorian.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that was like the perfect bridge. It was brilliant. It was like, okay, now I identify.
Yeah, yeah,
Everything
absolutely.
else was with some cute chick with a hammer, things like that. Like, no, like, why am I here? Right.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, that totally makes sense, and you just need to and that's why the IP stuff works so well. Like if you were an entertainment brand, like getting into games, it's much easier to do that. But if you're like, if you're Pizza Hut or something like that, like you might have less to offer in that respect. So you need to be creative about how you think about doing a brand engagement in that sense.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Jamin, can you let everyone know how they can reach out to you, learn more about your company, and how can they get in contact with you directly?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to 256, our website. So that's TWOFIVESIX.co. So 256, the number is spelled out. We have a biweekly newsletter that we send out, and then LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find. Jamin, Jamin Warren. I'm pretty sure I'm the only the only one on there. So reach out over LinkedIn. Those are the two best places to get in touch.
Amazing. Jamin, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a lot of
Of
fun. I love
of course.
talking about this stuff, and I really appreciate you breaking